We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. It's Wednesday, February 4th, 2026, coming live on rumble.com/amradpod and YouTube at amradpod1. You can also check us out over at X American News, at Real Steve Friend. But if you're on the Twitter space, come on over to Rumble and YouTube. If you like to listen to us after the fact on the audio format, Spotify, iHeart, iTunes, you can do that. We will drop the show there like an hour from now when we get done recording it. And as always, guys, make sure you do all those things. Follow, subscribe, give us the thumbs up. Word of mouth definitely helps. Drop a comment, and they are helping us expand out the brand to radicalize more Americans to our very commonsensical way of thinking here on the AmRad Pod. Today, we're going to be talking about the small R Republic. Go back into the American lore about Benjamin Franklin, that famous story that all the politicians and political actors like to lean on whenever they can do something that's convenient for their way of thinking. And that's going to include some judges who are fighting on behalf of illegal aliens and Haitian refugees. The Maryland Man, not the hero we deserve, but the one we need, according to our political betters in mainstream media. The Department of Homeland Security is targeting Americans with a secret weapon. We'll give you a little bit more information about that. But at the same time, they're also going to be wearing body cameras. We have local prosecutors are joining the hashtag resistance to fight on behalf of local government small R Republican form. The doctrine of the lesser magistrate is alive and well amongst the Soros guys from the district attorney's offices. And we'll close it out with a hotel bathroom agenda, because I think we can all come together on that one. So let's get after it. Let's begin today with a puff piece over at the New York Times, at one point a newspaper which is doing backflips, nearly orgasmic, over a ruling that came from a Clinton-appointed judge on behalf of two illegal aliens who were being detained for being illegal aliens. So the headline reads, in under 500 words, a judge weaponized wit, it's alliteration, guys, to free the child detained by ICE. This is about this kid that we talked about on the AmRad Pod last week, the kid who was 5 years old, and everybody was clutching their pearls at the Washington Post because democracy dies in darkness. And the New York Times, at one point a newspaper, the NBC, ABC, CBS, all those mainstream leftist rags for saying, can you believe it, Department of Homeland Security, they are grabbing kindergartners, when in reality, this kid was standing next to his dad, who was an illegal alien, and his dad abandoned him and ran away. So the ICE agents detained them both because neither one of them is an American citizen. They're both illegal aliens, and they should, like the other 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million illegal aliens that the Biden administration allowed into the country and sometimes flew into the country, they should be marched down Trail of Tears style to the Rio Grande at gunpoint, forced across, and then we position a nice angry testosterone-fueled 18-year-old atop a Humvee with a 50 cal pointing in their direction saying, do not come back. That's one of the few actual charges of a small R Republican constitutional form of government that we have of our federal government, the whole social compact. But the New York Times was really mega Doppler impressed with the linguistic flair, the weaponized wit of this federal judge who actually ruled in favor of the illegal aliens. So they broke down this 500-word decision that pertained to habeas corpus, because lawyers for these illegal aliens, the father and the 5-year-old, said, hey, you have them detained and you haven't justified having them, and habeas corpus demands that the government say why you have them. And the judge said, yep, you have to let them go free. So from the decision itself, that again, the New York Times, at one point a newspaper, is very excited to tell you about because it was just so darn witty. Here are some quotations from the judge. The case has its genesis in an ill-conceived and incompetently implemented, man, this guy loves alliteration, government pursuit of daily deportation quotas, apparently, even if it requires traumatizing children. As an aside, I'm not for government quotas when it comes to enforcing the law. I don't think that you should have a number of tickets that a traffic cop should write. I don't think the FBI should have integrated program management that has, hey, we have to have a certain number of white collar arrests, a certain number of terrorist cases. It's not a widget making factory. I understand that. But if you want to set an agenda for deporting between 10 and 50 million illegal aliens, and you need to set a quota to do that, I don't really care very much, particularly when it doesn't involve American citizens, people who have not signed up for our social compact. But this judge is conflating it, saying that government quotas are a very bad thing, even when it's illegal aliens who are not part of our government. Back to the piece. In under 500 words, a judge weaponized wit to free the child detained by ICE. Apparent also is the government's ignorance of an American historical document called the Declaration of Independence. This jerk is going to lean on the dusty document that he, in the rest of his life, resents entirely. And he's going to pull out some of the quotations that are very convenient for his argument here. He leans on a couple of the grievances that were redressed within the Declaration of Independence. Notably, he has sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people. He has excited domestic insurrection among us, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. Okay, Your Honor, if you want to do the whole just a bill up on Capitol Hill with me, you're going to be out of your depth. And I don't care how many years you went to law school, because you forgot the day they taught law at law school, apparently. That old pesky Declaration of Independence, the pesky, dusty document that it is. It is a breakup letter between the colonies and the king. They are forming their own country. They're complaining to the king saying, hey, we don't want to break up with you, but we kind of have to. You've kind of forced our hand here. We're going to itemize what the problems are because you've done this to us, your subjects, your citizens. We're supposed to have a social compact with you, King George III, and you're not honoring that. To cite the Declaration for a bunch of illegal aliens is not an apples to apples comparison, because they're not part of our social compact. And while we're on the subject of talking about redressing their grievances and the ones you cited that were very convenient for you, where Your Honor Clinton appointed, Your Honor, by the way, where did you stand on swarms of officers when the Inflation Reduction Act passed under the Biden administration hired like 80,000 new IRS agents? Did you think that was a problem at the time? Did you pass any sort of a press pause rulings, a temporary restraining order? No, I didn't see you on that one. There's also a second part of that when it comes to swarms of officers, because it's ... and eat out their substance, like that OSHA mandate that the Biden administration tried to push forward that said you had to inject an illegal gene juice into your arm, experimental. And unless you did that, you couldn't have a job. I mean, that might impact your substance, your ability to pay your mortgage and feed your family. Your Honor, was there any stay on that one that came from you behind the bench? Quartering large bodies. What about big tech and the collusion that we've seen between the federal government and social media companies and technology companies, where they can get Alexa to listen into what you're talking about? Have you done anything to stop that, Judge? No, I haven't seen your name on any of that. How about for imposing taxes on us without our consent? Inflation, the whole thing where the government prints more and more money until the dollars in your bank account become worth less and worth less until they become worthless. At the time, right around when we wrote that dusty document, the Declaration of Independence, a dollar by those standards would be worth over $25 today, because the government has just printed so darn many dollars out there and they're chasing those goods. How about some other redressive grievances? For depriving us, in many cases, of the benefits of a trial by jury. How many trials have come before you, Your Honor? And then you just said, we're not going to go all the way to jury. We're just going to have a plea deal because this guy here can't afford a lawyer anymore, and he just better get the best deal possible. 98% of federal prosecutions go to a plea deal. Now, most of those are guys who did it. But how many of them are the Carl Nelsons of the world, husbands of Amy Nelson, who, because Amazon lobbied the Department of Justice more than 100 times over a year span, got the Department of Justice to bring an honest services fraud BS case against Carl because Amazon needed to have some sort of criminal conviction in order to get out of a deal in real estate, and then seized all his family's assets and pressured him to plead guilty, pressured some of his colleagues to flip on him, even though none of them had committed a crime. And then it was such an egregious violation of our system of justice that a federal judge thankfully said, I'm going to overturn these guilty pleas and drop all charges. And still, the Department of Justice won't play ball with the Nelsons. I got one more too. For transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offense. 1512, obstruction of official proceeding used against January 6ers who were not from Washington, D.C. And we sent out swarms of officers to arrest them for misdemeanor trespass at worst and said that they were terrorists who had stopped an official proceeding of an election. Meanwhile, the law that was being applied in a novel process by the Department of Justice was a tax law, was about evidence handling. Your Honor, did you speak up about that? Were there any restraining orders that you released? No. But you're very, very mega Doppler concerned about the well-being of a 5-year-old illegal alien and his dad who abandoned him to federal officers. We'll go back to this piece and then move on to the next one. Here are some more quotations from this judge's ruling. Quote, and then there is that pesky inconvenience called the Fourth Amendment, unquote. The Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, that's an agreement between the federal government and citizens, not illegal aliens. Your Honor, remember when a bill up on Capitol Hill, the PBS special, did you not learn about law the day they taught it at law school? He likes to talk about things about Philadelphia, September 17th, 1787. Well, Dr. Franklin, what do we have? A republic, if you can keep it, madam. This guy is a douche. And leaning on that Ben Franklin story is basically on par with saying that George Washington chopped down a cherry tree. There's no actual objective evidence that it actually happened, but for political actors, it sounds really good with rhetorical flair. What did they say? Weaponizing wit. You don't know your butt from a hole in the wall, apparently, Your Honor, but you're a communist. You want to reward your friends, punish your enemies, use the levers of power because you've instituted yourself there, so you're going to let some illegal aliens go free. Well done, Your Honor. All right, let's talk about another judge, but I got a video to cue it up here because apparently now sending Haitians back to Haiti is a bad thing because their country's terrible. Question is, who made it terrible? Here's a Democrat representative decrying sending Haitians back to Haiti.
Sending these people back to Haiti is basically a death sentence. And that's why we are asking the administration to open up their hearts and to extend this TPS.
TPS, temporary protective status. It's a death sentence to send Haitians back to Haiti. They've had temporary protective status, refugee status in our country for over a decade and a half. Since 2010, there was an earthquake. And that was extended during the Biden administration. So dug into the archives, found the following. This was from Secretary Mayorkas, Alejandro Mayorkas, ruling at the time that he was extending temporary protective status for Haitians, and the Trump administration is trying to reverse that. So at the time, Secretary Mayorkas decided to designate Haiti for temporary protective status due to extraordinary and temporary conditions. Temporary. I guess the earthquake after a decade and a half, it's still an ongoing problem. The designation of Haiti for TPS also is not contrary to the national interest of the United States. A country may be designated for TPS based upon 3 conditions. One of them could be an ongoing armed conflict, which isn't going on in Haiti, Environmental disasters, which 15 years ago, maybe, but not currently. And then the last one, the catch-all, extraordinary and temporary conditions. How long are temporary, though, in the eyes of the Alejandro Mayorkases, or in the eyes of a judge that, according to the New York Times, wants to keep those Haitians in America? So, headline from the New York Times at one point, a newspaper: federal judge blocks end of protection for Haitians in the United States. Judge Anna Reyes temporarily blocked the Trump administration from ending a humanitarian protection of more than 330,000 Haitians. That's like 4 football stadiums full of them. How many large cities are there? This is like the size of Des Moines, which is the capital of Iowa. Now they've been able to live here and work here, and now they get to remain here thanks to this judge, because we have a small r Republican form of government, or we have rule by fiat. A few individuals who are communists who've been able to seize onto power. It is in the form of wearing a black robe. They get to determine that over 300,000 people who aren't American, who have not signed up for our social compact, and yet get to milk our system dry. But you, the American, the one who's subject to things like the Fourth Amendment, the government continually abuses, that's your problem. These people are just the best of us. They can't go back to Haiti. Why is Haiti so bad, by the way? Oh, because Haitians made it that way? If Haitians are so great that they need to be included into our melting pot, why don't they go back to Haiti and make Haiti awesome? No, that can't happen. We have to have a symbol, though, a symbol, the hero we need, but not the one we deserve. So, these judges out there, these communists wearing black robes, they've found the new one, and not just the judges, politicians as well. We're going to go back to the Maryland man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. As a refresher, this is the guy who tuned up his old lady and was still considered to be awesome. He's not doing any human trafficking or involving himself with MS-13 or engaging in domestic violence. This is the interview that his girlfriend did on Good Morning America with Michael Strahan, hard-hitting journalist Michael Strahan, who was an NFL football player. So I don't know how many IQ points he lost during all those concussions, but this is the interview to kick us off.
The administration, they're resisting a court order to bring your husband back to the U.S. They say your husband's a member of the MS-13 gang. Is he a member of the MS-13 gang or any other gang?
No, he's not.
And I know this is a sensitive question, but I have to ask it. You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
Husband is alive. That's all I can say.
Okay, and I'm not going to push on that apparently. But how much hope do you have that you're going to be reunited with your husband, and what keeps you and your family going?
I'm going to pause it there. What keeps you and your family going, other than the ebbs and flows between, he's tuning you up and beating you up and putting you in fear of your life to the point where you have to call the police to have him arrested, and then he promises never to do it again. That constant domestic violence cycle that goes on there, and now she won't even answer the question. But Kilmar Abrego Garcia is now the symbol, according to NPR, which is still alive, guys, even though they don't get that sweet, sweet government cash until the Republicans cave and give it to them, probably sometime around the end of this year when they have to pass another budget. Headline from NPR: Kilmar Abrego Garcia becomes symbol of mistaken deportations. I don't think it was a mistake to send an MS-13 illegal alien to El Salvador because he's from El Salvador, but NPR says something different, so let's find out. Advocates warn that the speed at which the administration is removing some people increases the possibility of errors. President Trump has set a target being a quota, if you're not tracking with what the problem was with our original weaponized wit judge pointed out. President Trump has set a target of 1 million deportations a year. Before we proceed, 1 million deportations a year. There's 50 million of them here. So if you meet your quota, Mr. President, that gets you 8% of the way there. Not enough. Not what I voted for. Not what the American people voted for. We wanted mass deportations. We wanted all of them gone. But you're saying that this goal of 1 million a year is sufficient? Well, NPR is saying it's over the top. It's way, way too many. We can't possibly do that. That's the problem. We have to keep them here. Those illegal aliens who didn't sign up for the social compact, those pesky, dusty documents where the American people gave up some of our liberty in return for the government to protect the border. Those people we have to allow here. NPR is saying, though, they're just going way too fast. So mistakes are happening. Mistakes like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, an illegal alien who was deported to El Salvador, where he's from, was apparently a mistake. But because of the speed, administrative officials have often set daily quotas for removals because they got to get to 1 million. Various legal protections from deportation, including deferred action and humanitarian parole programs like the Haitians, 300,000 who were allowed to be here because of an earthquake that happened 16 years ago. They're administered by different agencies. And because the left hand isn't talking to the right hand, sometimes people fall through the cracks. You mean non-citizens being sent to other countries that are not ours? That means immigrants who should have protection from deportation are sometimes caught in the crosshairs. Lawyers have cited numerous instances of court orders or protection from removal being issued minutes before someone is supposed to be on a flight or already in the air. Bravo. Great job. I would like to see this ramped up even more. The Trump administration has, without evidence, accused Abrego Garcia of being a member of MS-13. He has MS-13 gang tattoos and wears their paraphernalia. He's also been called a, quote, wife beater and child predator. Well, he was arrested for domestic violence. He's also been charged with human smuggling. He was caught by a Tennessee trooper with like 13 people in a van. None of them spoke English. I think that's prima facie evidence that the guy was smuggling humans. But NPR feels mega Doppler bad for him. He's the symbol, not the hero we deserve, the one that we need, according to National Public Radio. All right, it's enough snark, enough tongue in cheek. Let's talk about some actual things that are of concern to you, the American Radicals podcast audience, Americans who do have a social compact. And I saw this interesting report because blind squirrel finds an acorn every now and then. The Washington Post, Democracy Dies in Darkness, has found a secret weapon that the Department of Homeland Security is using and abusing, and they're actually on it, but because it's their side, not because it's in general the wrong thing to use. Headline: Homeland Security is targeting Americans with this secretive legal weapon. And they wind up profiling this guy whose name is John, last name unknown, because he wants to protect his anonymity, and he did so by talking to the Washington Post. And he wound up, John's kind of like one of these guys who just reads the Washington Post and then watches MSNBC and then sends strongly worded emails to his elected officials and judges. And he wound up sending an email to a federal prosecutor because he saw a very disturbing story about the Department of Homeland Security trying to deport an Afghan who he had a sense of the feels for. And he said, do better. You know, we're going to lose our republic. Benjamin Franklin, you know, all that sort of stuff. And he didn't make any threats or anything, but he sends an email. And First Amendment says you're allowed to do that, particularly to representatives within the government. You can express your outrage that they could be deporting somebody who's not an American. I guess John felt compelled to do it. And I don't hate him for doing that. I just disagree with him. But then he got an alert. He got an email from Google saying that his Google records were being subpoenaed through an administrative subpoena, not a criminal subpoena, one that actually works through a grand jury process. And that's when Washington Post does a deep dive on how Department of Homeland Security is using the admin subpoena. Now, I do have a certain level of subject matter expertise in this regard. The administrative subpoena, you don't have to go through a grand jury in order to get it, but it has to be through a very narrow scope, kind of. So this is what we were taught, at least, and it might have changed in the intervening time. It hasn't changed, though, guys. There's a certain number of cases that you can use an admin subpoena, administrative subpoena, in order to get some information. You don't get content, but I can send an administrative subpoena over to Google to get the account's name, the person who started that Google account, and the IP address, which I could lead to get a location for, geographical, and maybe their internet information, because then I can figure out who's paying the internet bills. And you can kind of build a profile of an individual based on an administrative subpoena, and you send them out. And you can do them for healthcare cases, which I didn't work. You can do it for child exploitation cases, which I did work. You can do it for drug trafficking cases as well, and financial cases. So you can see how the Venn diagram would overlap with just about everything. So it's ripe for abuse. Financial cases. I mean, is it really a white collar case? No, but money might have been involved. So you can kind of play around the edges on that one. And according to the Washington Post, they're really upset because Department of Homeland Security used it on John. And they've used it extensively under the Trump administration because Trump's mean, orange, and literally Hitler. But in this piece, again, from the Washington Post, they did hone in on something which we have pointed out numerous times on the American Radicals podcast, and that is how the administrative subpoena has become this tool du jour. Quote, the U.S. government has issued such subpoenas for decades, but their use expanded and became more controversial after the September 11th, 2001 attacks. A vast range of agencies, from the FBI to the Labor Department, can deploy them for specific types of investigations. There you have it. The national security mission. National security. When the mission of national security changed after September 11th, that's when that administrative subpoena, we started to really be more expansive in the way we use it. Now, this guy, John, they subpoenaed his Google records, but that wasn't it. Then they sent agents to his home to just get his side of the story about him emailing a federal prosecutor saying, you shouldn't do that. Nothing threatening, just sending an email. He also had some notices in his luggage when he traveled from TSA that his luggage had been pulled out for extra scrutiny. Weaponized government. It ain't no fun when the rabbits got the gun, right, John? Where were you when this was going on with people who walked through the Capitol to petition Congress, when they gathered, to express their opinions on things like you did? Were you in their support, or were you saying, go get those terrorists? It ain't no fun when the rabbits got the gun, right? It's always wrong. I'm consistent on this. I don't care who's in charge. I don't care if it's this FBI or that FBI or this White House or that White House, this Department of Justice, that Department of Justice. It's never acceptable to weaponize processes, because I actually believe in that dusty document, that Declaration of Independence, that Bill of Rights. It's supposed to be consistent for our citizens. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Weaponized government is forever. Status quo is undefeated unless anybody has the gumption to change things. Now, there are certain things that are trending in the right direction against weaponized government. And we did get a social media post because that's the way we live now, because our principals within the federal government, they're really, really concerned about their follower count, not really serving their fellow citizens as much. But we got the Secretary of Homeland Security, Ice Barbie, Secretary Kristi Noem. She announced that she'd just spoken to Tom Homan, and effective immediately, they were deploying body cameras to every officer in the field in Minneapolis. So, congratulations, Secretary Noem. You should do that to all officers, as should every agency with the federal government. I want more transparency. What, just because they happen to be in a hostile territory, we're going to record it? They're being recorded anyway. I think that information should be shared widely. In fact, I'm just kind of looking over the horizon to electoral politics. If, barring some sort of Joe Rogan-esque or Sean Ryan-esque meteoric rise of the American Radicals podcast, and hope springs eternal, if you happen to be watching us on YouTube at AmRadPod1 or Rumble at AmRadPod, do give us a thumbs up. We want to expand. We want to overtake the likes of those Dan Bonginos out there who are attacking the black pillars and the dipwads. But barring some sort of meteoric rise, I'm looking at 2028 and thinking, maybe Volusia County could use a friend in the sheriff's office. And if that happens, I'd be happy to send my officers out there with their body camera footage in the event that a federal agent knocked on the door like they did to John in that Washington Post story because he sent a email to a federal prosecutor. You know what would be kind of in keeping with the doctrine of lesser magistrate? If the federal government sends somebody to your door, you can call up your sheriff. And as a public service, I'll send a deputy to your house and they can record the entire thing in the event that that federal agent isn't recording, which they're not required to do, just to make sure that everything's on the up and up. Nothing illegal about that. I think that would be a nice campaign promise to make. All right. Let's pivot over to some district attorneys who have now discovered small r Republican form of government, the doctrine of the lesser magistrate, but they're Soros guys because it's convenient for them. So this was a press statement from this group, prweb.com. Headline reads, National Group of District Attorneys and Prosecutors come together to push back against federal overreach. Man, have they seen the light, or are they just communists who are using whatever is at their disposal? I think it's the latter, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Project for the Fight Against Federal Overreach, an effort to hold federal officials accountable when they exceed their lawful authority, especially in states around the country where federal agents are being surged. The coalition launches amid growing concerns about warrantless entries, unlawful detentions, and coercive enforcement tactics by federal agents, and it's intended to ensure that constitutional limits on federal power are actively enforced through lawful institutions. That sounds fantastic, except for one inconvenient fact in these cases, and that is that these unlawful detentions are of illegal aliens who don't have constitutional protections. So that is sort of an inconvenient fact. But if they were willing to be consistent, and spoiler, they're not, that would be awesome. Wouldn't you like to have a local sheriff or a local district attorney who is willing to stand in the gap against an out-of-control federal government, one that says, hey, shut down your non-essential business that you use to feed your family and pay your mortgage because we have some sort of upper respiratory infection going around. We're all in this together, plebe. Okay. And similarly, like these communist district attorneys, I do have another piece from the New York Times at one point newspaper, which is highlighting what's going on in the Chicago Police Department because they're all on board with the hashtag resistance as well. So headline from the New York Times, Chicago orders police to document potentially illegal federal immigration tactics. Now, this is coming from Brandon Johnson, the mayor, and he's basically ordering his police to do the job of police, but they think it's resistance. Now, go with me on this one. The order instructs Chicago police officers to ensure that body cameras worn by officers record any use of force, injuries, or other actions, as well as name and badge number of supervisory federal officer present at an immigration operation. So make sure you flip on your body camera when you're doing public safety in the area of federal officers. They should be on no matter what. So that's not really changing anything, but it sounds good to his communist base. Another element of this order, officers that are called to a scene involving federal immigration agents are also now required to report any apparent violations of state or local law. Again, you're there for public safety. If you happen to see somebody, whether or not they're wearing a federal badge or placard, or a citizen engaging in an unlawful act that's violative of state or local law, you are required to report that. That's kind of the job description of being a cop. The third element, it also requires Chicago police to provide immediate medical care if needed to anyone present. Public safety. So this is a good thing if it was actually in good faith. ICE is carrying out some sort of some removal operation, some ERO. Well, then shouldn't Chicago police be there to do crowd control, to enforce local law, local state law, to make sure that they can do it safely and say, hey, look, we're going to hold perimeter down. We're going to make sure that people are safe and exercising their First Amendment rights to gather, to speak, to protest. But we don't want them getting involved in a crime scene. That's dangerous for them. And if there's a medical emergency here, either inside the perimeter or outside the perimeter, we're going to render aid. And the entire time, our body cameras are going to be rolling so we can document any sort of violation of the law, and just to ensure that the constitutional rights of individuals involved, the citizens involved, are protected. So Brandon Johnson giving this resistance order, which is effectively good law enforcement But he's a communist, so he's not really in favor of good law enforcement as long as it is opposed to any sort of constitutional small r Republican understanding of the way that our government is supposed to operate. I've got one more that I want to get to, and kind of on the lighter side, because we've been drilling down hard into the illegal aliens and illegal immigration matters here. And one industry that's been really hit hard, and much to my chagrin, Donald Trump wants to back off on this because he's big in the hotel industry. He wants those illegal aliens to be part of the workforce. And I want to go to this because we might disagree one way or another on what we should do with illegal aliens. I want Trail of Tears. Brandon Johnson wants amnesty. But can we not come together on this? And that is, we are trending in a very wrong direction when it comes to bathroom doors in hotels. So a headline from the Washington Post, or no, this is the Wall Street Journal. Hotels are getting rid of proper bathroom doors, and guests are revolting. We're all in this together, guys. First, they came for the closets. Then they came for the bathtubs. Now hotels are stripping away the only thing separating us from the animals, the bathroom door. And, by animals, I don't think they're referring to illegal aliens, but you kind of get my drift here, because I don't think many Haitians deal with solid bathroom doors. Guests are waving goodbye to the luxury of a fully closable opaque barrier between the restroom and bedroom, checking in to find sliding barn doors, curtains, and strategically placed walls and other replacements that aren't as proficient in the art of noise and smell containment. Amen. What the heck is going on with this? I've done a lot of traveling, more than I care to, in the last 3 years. Done some speaking engagements and participated in a bunch of different stuff. Went and met the FBI director at his request and tried to give him some advice on stuff and go for his movie launch. Wherever I go, there's this new trend in hotels. There's no longer any doors in the showers and doors to the bathroom. And that's a problem if you have to share a space with anybody in a hotel room. But hotels are up against it, particularly after coronavirus. Travel was down. People aren't going around having to use hotels as often. They're having to cut costs, and putting up doors actually costs money. The material, the repair, the upkeep. And then when people are able to close doors to bathrooms, they tend to be a little bit messier in the bathroom. And as a result of that, the housekeeping has to do more work and they have to pay more housekeepers. So it's all part of this meta-analysis of cost cutting. But I don't care. What separates us from the animals is a barrier. I'm not out there doing my business in the wild. Neither should you, and neither should somebody who I have to share a hotel room with, even if my wife and kids, be subject to what goes on in there. So the takeaway here, guys, is we're talking about small r Republican form of government. We're supposed to be pursuing our better nature, right? We're working towards a more perfect union, and be that in form of a social compact between the populace and their government to ensure that we have basic human rights, that we're enforcing the laws that we actually have, that we're ensuring that we have domestic tranquility, and that we're keeping our borders secure, and we have a government that has a very finite amount of responsibilities, protecting us against fraud and force, chief amongst them, and we can trust our elected officials and our judiciary to actually uphold their oath of office. That's all great and wonderful. We want to have police on top of that who are adhering to their oaths, to maintaining public safety, all of that. It's awesome. But if we can't have doors on our hotel bathrooms, then there's nothing separating us from a bunch of Haitians who are still suffering from the effects of an earthquake that was 16 years ago. All right. So that's going to do it for us today on the American Radicals podcast. I do, however, have, as always, a nice palate cleanse. In Florida, I do have Florida privilege. This is the state in which woke and winter storms go to die most of the time. We did get hit. I think there was an iceberg sighting out off the coast of Daytona Beach recently. But I am a weird guy. I don't like the snow. I don't like the dogs, but I realize that many people in the AMRAD audience do. So maybe you were distracted in the last few days, like this person was, who built a racetrack in the snow for his fur baby.
Lola, ripping through the track. Sharp corner, S-turn. Oh, the hairpin corner.
Good times, I guess, for some of y'all out there. All right, guys, that'll do it for us today on the American Radicals podcast. If you haven't already, do all those things. Follow, share, thumbs up, subscribe. Appreciate you guys. Make sure you leave a comment. We'll plan to be back with you tomorrow, noontime Eastern, YouTube at AmRadPod1, Rumble at AmRadPod. And until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRadPod.